Week 15 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few players I would stash this week. The first player, Keon Coleman of the Buffalo Bills. So he's been banged up for a little now, is Keon Coleman, missing multiple weeks in a row, but now he's going to return in Week 15 at the Lions. And Coleman, he could add another element to this offense for this Buffalo Bills. Well, we know this offense, they've been playing great football, no doubt about it. But Coleman out there in 60% of fantasy leagues. And I would go out there to the waiver wire and stash him because you just never know with a young rookie coming back, and this team, they could use a little more boost at the receiver position, even though we know they got Amari Cooper and Khalil Shakir. So this season he had a couple decent games, was Keon Coleman, but never consistent. But he did have 3 touchdowns on games, was Keon Coleman. So I think this week, if you need a receiver and you want to stash someone, maybe Coleman could be someone that could break out towards the end of the year. Next stash, Demario Douglas, New England Patriots. Demario Douglas, the number one target in this New England Patriot offense. They're coming off a bye week, and they got an okay matchup coming up at the Arizona Cardinals. So Douglas, he's out there in tons of fantasy leagues right now in 78%, and he could run the routes. He's a good yard after catch player, and him and Drake May, I've thought, have had a decent rapport. So the last few weeks, week 11 versus the Rams, 4 catches, 59 yards. Week 12 at Miami, a carry, 1 yard, 5 catches, 62 yards. In Week 13 versus Indianapolis, 4 catches, 20 yards. So like I said, with a good matchups coming up, and after coming off a bye week where he'll be even more into the playbook, I believe, and more anointed as the number one wideout on this offense, I think Demario Douglas is a good stash this week, because it wouldn't be surprising to me if he goes out there, has 12, 15 fantasy points in this one. Next stash, Jalen McMillan of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. McMillan available in 92% of fantasy leagues. Last week he had a breakout game for McMillan, 4 catches, 59 yards, 2 touchdowns. And I know this season the numbers haven't been great, but now more integrated into the offense. They're starting to get things going. Tampa Bay winning 3 in a row after the bye. In defensive coverages, they're going to focus on Mike Evans and Rachaad White out of the backfield, where Jalen McMillan, he just has to beat that one-on-one coverage, and that's exactly what he did in last week's ball game. So this week, a decent matchup coming up at the Chargers. I believe there's going to be put points on the board by both teams. And Jalen McMillan, he was a highly touted prospect out of college. And like I said, we've seen a couple flashes from him this season, with last week being his best game of his career so far in the early going. So this week, if he goes out there once again as a big game, he's going to be a hot waiver wire pickup. So right now, I would stash him because he's got a great matchup coming up in Week 16 as well with the Dallas Cowboys. Next stash, Sincere McCormick and the Vegas Raiders. I mentioned McCormick a lot throughout the weeks in the videos. Still out there in 70% of fantasy leagues. And even if Alexander Madison or Zamir White did return to this lineup, I believe McCormick's the guy in the backfield for this Las Vegas Raider team. So the last few weeks for McCormick, Week 12 versus Denver, 5 carries, 33 yards. Week 13 at the Chiefs, 12 carries, 64 yards, 2 catches, a yard. And Week 14 at Tampa Bay, 15 carries, 78 yards, 2 catches, 11 yards. So he's the man in the backfield over there. Like I said, we saw all season long White and Madison, and they just couldn't get anything going, obviously, for this Raider team, where McCormick looking like the best option. So a Monday night game versus the Falcons, where it's a good matchup on paper, I think McCormick could go out there once again, be a serviceable option, and he's going to keep getting added in leagues. So this would be the time right now to go out there and stash him this week. The next stash, Kamini Vidal of the Los Angeles Chargers, out there in 88% of fantasy leagues. Gus Edwards, he's been the lead back, but Vidal, he's more of a third down back and passing downs back. And now just in between the tackles, we have to see him get more work as Vidal. So the last 2 weeks since J.K. Dobbins has been out, Week 13 at Atlanta, 4 carries, 20 yards. In Week 14 at the Chiefs, he did have 8 carries, 34 yards, where Gus Edwards had 10 touches in that game. So the touches pretty much were similar. I know he didn't do anything in the passing game, 1 target. But this week, a good matchup versus the Bucs that give up the 16th most fantasy points to running backs on the season. So right now, Vidal, I think he's a player fantasy owners should go out there and stash, because Gus Edwards, he's not running away with the job, and he's on a 3-down back as well. He don't catch the football out of the backfield. So Vidal, definitely a stash this week. Next stash, Jeremy McNichols of the Washington Commanders. We know Austin Eckler's still on IR. He's out with a concussion. Is Austin Eckler. McNichols now the backup with Brian Robinson. He's been banged up a lot this season with hamstring injuries and leg injuries and stuff like that. So McNichols, we've seen some flashes from him in the early going of the season, and he's a dynamic back. He could catch the football out of the backfield, physical in between the tackles, and now he's the number 2 option on the depth chart. So let's say he gets some work in this game, or Brian Robinson goes down, he's one of the better stashes and possibly could be a league winner is Jordan McNichols. Like I said, early in the season, going back week 4, Arizona, he had 8 carries, 68 yards, 2 touchdowns, a catch, 6 yards. And then another game after that in week 5 versus the Browns, 7 for 44 and a touchdown. So he's definitely showed some flashes in McNichols. Now with Eckler out of the picture and he's the backup running back, I believe he could go out there and still get work week in and week out. But like I said, if Robinson ever went down with injury, he'll step in most likely as the starting running back and be a D-stash option this week. It's a few plays I will look to stash for week 15 of the fantasy football season.